All right, so we are going to do 7-1 and 7-2 today. The reason I'm putting them together is because they're the exact same thing. They're dealing with fractions and percents and decimals, okay? When you take your notes, we're going to have our notes in 4 distinct sections. So we're going to have 7-1A, 7-1B, and then we'll have 7-2A and 7-2B. And I'll show you why I'm being so specific about how I want you to divide up your notes, okay? So we're going to be talking about fractions and percents, and just, you don't have to even put this on your notes, but just so we're all clear, a percentage is basically a part over a whole, right? And if you think about, if I was to tell you that you get the whole cake, what percentage of the cake are you getting? 100%. So typically, when we talk about percentages, we talk about some percentage out of 100%. Okay. All right. So the first section I want you to label is 7-1. And the way I want you to label it, and you don't have this whole sentence, if that's more writing than what you need to write. For 7-1, you just need to write that you're going from percent to fraction. Okay, that's how you're going to label the first section. We're going from percent to a fraction. So in this first section, all of your answers should be reduced fractions. Okay, and notice that it does say in its simplest form. So we are going to reduce these fractions if we can. All right. So when you have 35%, this should be review. How do we reduce, or how do we turn this into a fraction? Does anybody remember, Colin?
Isn't it 35 over 100?
Yeah, you just simply write 35 over 100 because it's 35% of 100%, right? And because it says in its simplest form, we're going to reduce these. And we know that they're both divisible by 5 because they end in a 5 or a 0. So I go with 7/20, 7 over 20. And that is 35% expressed as a fraction in its simplest form. Now,
So nice.
I know we're going to go, we will use this part right here in a minute when we do one like number 2, but we're not going to do number 2 yet. So hang on. But really 35 is 35 over 1, right? Does everybody agree with me that every whole number is really over 1? So really all we did was we kept the numerator and we added 2 zeros to the denominator. Does that make sense? That's going to come in handy here in a second. We're going to do a couple more examples of the super easy ones, and then we'll move to ones that are a little bit more difficult. All right, 500 is the same thing, right? You just simply write 500 over 100 and then simplify it to 5. So if it's a whole number, like 32, 65, 500, it doesn't matter how big the number is, you just put it over 100 and reduce. Okay, are we good with that? All right, what if it's not a whole number? What if it is a decimal? Okay, we're going to do an example like this, 48.5. I'm still going to start out by putting it over 100, okay? I'm going to start out the same. However, I can't have a decimal in my fraction. So I'm going to make this a whole number by moving it 1 spot to the right. But if I do that to the top, I have to do it to the bottom. So I'm going to move this 1 spot to the right. And can I have an open spot? What do I need to put there? A 0. So when I rewrite this as a fraction, it's 485, right? I wrote it without the decimal, over 1,000 because I had to move the decimal place on both. And now I do need to reduce this. And if you're not sure where to start, they are both divisible by 5, right? So I know I can start there. It might have to be done twice, but I know I can at least start there because they both end in a 5 or a 0. So I'm going to divide by 5 and divide by 5. And when I divide 485 by 5, I get 97. And when I divide 1,000 by 5, whoops, that went wonky on me. There we go. When I divide 1,000 by 5, I get 200. Is that right? All right. And there are no common factors between 97 and 200, so that is considered simplified. Okay, we'll do one more example when there's a decimal, and then we'll move to when there is a fraction. The fractions are the easiest ones. Okay. All right. So again, this is just another example of like the one we just did. We still put it over 100. But we know we need to move that decimal. So we're going to go 1, 2. So then we're going to go 1, 2. And I know I can't have a blank spot, so I'm going to fill that with zeros. So now on the top, I have a whole 15. And on the bottom, I have a 1 with 4 zeros. And again, they both end in a 5 or a 0. So I am 100% sure they both can be divided by 5. And we'll see if it can go any further after that. 15 divided by 5 is 3. And what is that? 10,000 divided by 5 is what? 2,000. And that, of course, cannot be reduced because 3 is prime. Okay, are we good with that? Okay, we're still in the same section, right? We're still converting a percentage to a fraction, but what if it's already a fraction? But we still need to get rid of the percent sign. And here's where it's really nice. Okay, you don't have to write this part down. I'm just refreshing your memory. When I had 35%, that's really 35 over 1. To change it to a fraction, I simply kept the numerator and added 2 zeros to the denominator, right? I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to keep the numerator and I'm going to add 2 zeros to the denominator. Can that be reduced? Of course not, because 1's on top. Now let me erase this because that really has nothing to do with that problem. You don't have to put this in your notes. Okay, you've already got one example. I think you're good. Keep the numerator, add 2 zeros to the denominator. These are super, super simple. And this is why I want you to have good notes, because when you have good notes, you can just look at your notes and go, oh, keep the numerator, add 2 zeros. Okay, so it should be very easy. Now, what about when it is a mixed fraction? Let's turn it unmixed. So 2 times 10 is 20 plus 1 is 21 over 2. Now what do I do? And that was percentage, right? I haven't gotten rid of the percentage yet. Now I'm ready to get rid of the percentage by keeping the numerator, adding 2 zeros to the denominator. You don't have to put this one in your notes. I'm just going to do one more real quick. 6 times 8 plus 5 is 53 over 6. That's still a percentage because I haven't done anything to get rid of that. Now I'm going to get rid of the percentage by keeping the numerator, adding 2 zeros to the denominator, and that cannot be reduced. Yes?
How does that work? Like, why does it work?
Because if you want something to be a percentage, so technically we could, let's see, we want to keep it as a fraction. I'm trying to think of what's the easiest way to explain it. The percentage means that you move the, I'm trying to think of how to, so if we did 53 over 6, and that's a percent, really what percent means is over 100. Okay. And this is actually the long way the book explains it. So it's really the top number over 100, or the percentage over 100. Just like we did here, we had 35%, so we put 35% over 100. What that means is 35 divided by 100, right? Well, if you have 56 over 6, that goes in the numerator, and it's over 100. But we know that you can't, so if you have 53 over 6 divided by 100 over 1, we would change this to a multiplication problem. This takes us back 2 or 3 months. Okay, does that make sense so far? Tracking with what we did a couple months ago. Now, when you multiply across the top, you get 53. When you multiply across the bottom, you get 600. So it's very much a shortcut. but there is the math behind it. And that's the math behind it is whatever your percentage is always goes in the numerator over 100. But then when you do the manipulating to get rid of when you divide by when you have a fraction on top and you divide by a number, you got to flip it over and make it a multiplication problem. So, but good question. You're the first person all day that's asked for the kind of the meat behind the shortcut. So very good. Okay. Are we good there? That is section 7.1a. Good. All right. 7.1b. Okay. We're going to go the opposite way. We're going to go from a fraction to a percent. So we're just going the opposite way. Okay. From a fraction to a percent. Now, with that being said, if you're going to a percent, you have to have a percent sign on all your answers. Does that make sense? So make sure, okay, give yourself a star here that your answer has to have a percent sign. Okay. However you want to do that. And notice what it tells you to do. Round to the nearest hundredth. Okay. So that's going to become important when we get some of these that don't come out perfect. All right. So write each fraction as a percent. This, I think, is one of the easiest things. We're only going to do one example. Okay. Easiest part, I think. Here's why. We know in order to write it as a percent, we want it to be over 100. Everybody in agreement there? We don't know what X is. What can we do here? The butterfly. Every single one of these, you're going to set it up with X over 100 as the opposite fraction. It doesn't matter what they are. Okay. Actually, I lied. We're going to do two examples because of number 21, but let's work number 17. So the butterfly says we do 15 times X, which is 15X equals, and then we butterfly the other way. 4 times 100 is 400. When we divide by 15, we get what? Somebody tell me. X equals, go ahead. Okay, good. I'm glad you did that. So it's 26.66666666. Now, two things. One, our answer has to be written with a percent sign. And two, what are we supposed to round to? The hundredth. So I'm going to look at this is what I'm rounding to. My 6 here is going to dictate how I round. So my actual final answer is going to be 26.67%. Because I am going to a percent, I need to make sure I'm putting my percent sign on my answer. Okay. I do. I sure will. Thanks. Okay. So the only other one we're going to do as an example, and the only reason is because it looks a little different at the beginning, is if we have a mixed number, we have to first write it as an improper fraction. So we're going to multiply and add, and we've got 4 times 4 is 16, 17, 18, 19 over 4, and then we're still going to do the X over 100. Okay, so if it's a mixed fraction, change it to improper, and you're still going to set it equal to X over 100. So for 7.1 part B, every single one of them, you're going to work the same way. You're going to make sure it's a improper or a proper fraction, not a mixed. And then and it doesn't matter. Even if look at these big ugly numbers, doesn't matter. You still work it the same way. Okay. The main thing to remember here is that you're going to round to the nearest hundredth, and you got to make sure and add that percent sign at the end of your answer because you are converting to percents here. Good with that? Okay. Now go ahead and go to your next section that you have in your notes. And this is going to be 7-2 part A. And notice what we're going from here. We're going from percent to a decimal. Percent to decimal. So all of your answers here should be a decimal, and they don't tell you how to round. So use your best judgment. Okay. All right. I think 7.2 is super easy. Here's why. If we are going from a percent to a decimal, you move your decimal 2 spots to the, here's what's different about this part A. We're going to go left. Okay. So we are going to move our decimal 2 spots to the left. That is how we are going to convert these from a percentage to a decimal. Okay. Now I say that. Does 17%, is there a decimal somewhere in there? All right, so move your decimal 2 spots to the left. Well, in number 17, is there a decimal? It's there, it's just not there. Where's it at? Yeah, it's right here, right? So if to change this to a decimal, we just simply move the decimal 2 spots. We go 1, 2, and our answer is just where our new decimal point sits. So 0.17. And there's a whole lot of math behind that. It's because it's 17/100ths, and that's how you write 17/100ths as a decimal. And if you wrote it as 17/100 and then punched in your calculator 17 divided by 100, you'd get 0.17. But honestly, if you know the shortcut of just moving your decimal, then just do the shortcut, okay? So you do not need to do a bunch of these in your notes. I'm just going to do a couple of them real quick. I'm showing you honestly, this is how quick your homework is going to go. Okay. You're going to go decimal 1, 2, answer. You're going to go decimal 1, 2, answer. When I say 7.5 can be done in probably less than 3 minutes, this is why. Okay. What if, and if you want to put this in your notes, you can. It's not really different, but it looks a little different. The decimal is already there for you because it's not at the end. You still do the same thing. 1, 2, write your answer with your decimal in its new spot, and that's it. Okay, pretty easy. Now, the only one that I want to do for you, because it's a little different, is one like this. Okay, now there's a shortcut and a long way to do it. I'm going to show you the shortcut first because, well, I like shortcuts. When you have a mixed number, part of that is a whole number and part of that is a decimal. Does everybody agree with that? What part's the whole number? The 6. Okay, so the 6 is our whole number. Then we can put a decimal. And how would we convert 2/3 to finish the decimal part? Yeah, 2 divided by 3, which is 0.666, just whatever. And it doesn't tell you how to round, so 2 or 3 decimals out is fine with me because it's repeating. It goes on forever. All right, so all I have done here is I have written my mixed number as a fraction, or I mean as a decimal, but I haven't gotten rid of the percentage yet. What do I have to do to get rid of the percentage? 1, 2. I still got to move. I can't have a blank space, so I add a 0. So my answer is 0.06. And then honestly, at this point, if you just want to put repeating or 6.7 or 6.6, it doesn't really matter because they don't tell you how to round. So just however you want to leave it. Okay. Another example of a mixed. Okay. These are really easy. If we do it the shortcut, the whole number is 11. Put a decimal. How would you express 3/4 as a decimal? 0.75. And if you're not sure, just divide 3 by 4 in your calculator and you'll get 0.75. Now this is still a percent. So I still have to do what? I still have to move the decimal. So my answer is 0.1175. Okay. Last but not least is when you have a fraction. Okay, so when you have a fraction like number, let's see, which one do I want to do? Like number 17. I'm sorry, I was looking at the 17 on top. Number 15. So let's go ahead and put this one in your notes because this is the first one you've seen like this. It's still in A. Yeah, it's still at the top, 7-2A. All right, we know how to make a fraction a decimal, right? We can take 17 divided by 20, and it comes out to 0.85%. Now, all we did was we rewrote the fraction as a decimal, but it's still a percent until we do what? 1, 2, fill the spots with zeros because you can't have blank spots. So our actual answer here is a decimal and then 0085. Okay, super, super simple. Convert it to a decimal. I mean, at that point, it's still a percentage, but then you just do the bump to the left. Okay. All right. Now we're ready for our very last section, which is, I think, our easiest of the day. And these have all been pretty easy, is your 7-2B. 7-2B, the way you're going to label it is we are going from it's right here. You don't have to write all these directions. Decimal or fraction to a percent. That's what we're doing in 7-2 part B. Decimal or fraction to a percent. And again, remind yourself, however you need to do it, because we're going to a percent, our answer needs to have a percent sign. Okay. And if you notice at the top, to go from percent to decimal, we move 2 spots to the left. Guess what we got to do to go the other way? Move 2 spots. Oh, sorry, moved. I forgot to write the word decimal and I did up there. Sorry. Move decimal 2 spots to the, what do you guys think? Right. We're just going to go the opposite way. So we want to express this as a percent. So we just simply, if we have 0.95, we put our pencil where the decimal is and we go 1, 2. Put the decimal in its new spot. So that is 95. And then because we're going to a percent, remember all of these have to have a percent sign as the answer. Okay, it doesn't matter. Look at this one. Here's our percent. Okay, we're going to go 1, 2, put it in its new spot. So it would be 25.5%. None of these get any harder than this, really. Look at this one. You don't even have to put this in your notes. 1, 2. So we have 0.48, but our directions say to round to the what? 10th. So how would we round this? Colin? 0.5. And then don't forget, these are all percent. So on the sections where you're getting to a percent, make sure you actually put the percent sign. All right, last but not least, what do we do when we have 33 over 40? Guess what we convert it to? 33 divided by 40 in your calculator is 0.825. How do I change this to a percent? Decimal plot space goes 1, 2. Put my decimal in my new spot. So 82.5%. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That is 7-1 and 7-2. As hard as it gets, that's it. So for your homework, I want you to do on the front, which is 7-1, I want you to do odds only until you get to number 23. And then after 23, stop. You don't have to do the bottom section. On 7-2, it's odds only the whole paper. Okay, but 7-2, it's literally moving your decimal points to the left or to the right. So pretty simple stuff on that. Okay, for those of you at home, email me if you have any questions, and you can hit load on Cami and it'll load both pages, and then you can submit it through Cami.